I had known about the meeting for 3 days. Linda had called me on a Wednesday evening, Mark's wife. She spoke quietly, like someone checking over their shoulder while they dialed. "Robert, I need to tell you something. Sandra is organizing a family meeting this Saturday. She's been talking to Daniel and Mark for weeks about senior living options." A pause. "I'm sorry, I thought you should know." I thanked her, set the phone down, sat in Rebecca's chair for a long time. Then I got up, went to the desk, and began building the folder. Rebecca passed in 2019. Before she died, she sat with James Whitfield, our attorney of 20 years, and structured something careful, a family trust. Robert Patterson as sole trustee, disbursements at my discretion. A specific clause she had insisted on and that James had tried gently to talk her out of. She knew her family, James told me afterward. She was protecting you. For 5 years, I had quietly used that trust to hold this family together. Not because they asked, they never asked. They simply needed, and I gave, and nobody looked too carefully at where the money came from because it was easier not to. I did it for the grandchildren mostly, Emma and Tyler, Sandra and Daniel's kids, 7 and 9 years old. They had nothing to do with any of this. By Saturday morning, the folder was ready. I drove to Daniel's house, parked, sat in my truck for a moment. Then I picked up the folder and went inside. They were already seated when I walked in, Daniel and Sandra at the head of the table, Mark beside Sandra, Linda at the far end, hands folded, not looking at anyone. Sandra had arranged it like a meeting. Notepad in front of her, something printed, agenda maybe. Daniel looked up when I came in. Something moved across his face that was not quite guilt and not quite relief. Something uncomfortable that he quickly put away. "Dad, thanks for coming." "Of course," I said. I set the folder on the table in front of me, said nothing about it. Sandra straightened in her chair. "Robert, we asked everyone here because we care about you, and we've been having some conversations as a family about the future." "All right," I said. "We've been thinking about your situation, living alone. The house is large. You're 69, and we worry—" "Sandra," she stopped. "Say what you mean," I said quietly. She looked at Daniel. He looked at the table. She took a breath. "We think it's time to consider a senior living facility, somewhere with proper care, professional staff, people your age." "We're not saying forever," Mark said quickly. His voice was slightly too loud, the voice of a man repeating something he had rehearsed. "Just a transition." "I'm not sure this is the right—" Daniel started. "Daniel," Sandra's voice, firm, one word. He stopped. I looked at my son. He was 44 years old. He could not finish a sentence at his own table. "I want to be clear," Sandra continued. "This isn't about not wanting you around. It's practical. We both work full-time. Mark and Linda work full-time. Nobody can provide the level of care—" "I don't need care, Sandra," I said. "Dad," Daniel again. "I walk 4 miles every morning. I cook my own meals. I drove here today." "For now," Sandra said. "But these things change. We want to be ahead of it." The table was quiet. I looked at each face slowly. Daniel, jaw tight, eyes down. Mark, leaning back slightly, arms crossed, the posture of a man who wanted to be somewhere else. Linda, still not looking at anyone. Sandra, meeting my eyes steadily, certain. I put my hand on the folder. "Before we go any further," I said, "I'd like to share some information." I opened it. The first page was a summary sheet. 5 years of transactions, organized by category. Every figure documented with bank statements attached behind it. I read the first line aloud. Daniel and Sandra's mortgage, January 2021 through March 2024. Monthly transfers of $2,100. Total, $76,000. Sandra's pen stopped moving. Emma and Tyler's school fees, Westfield Primary, September 2021 through present. Total paid, $61,000. Daniel looked up slowly. Sandra's medical bills, St. Mercy Hospital, surgery and rehabilitation, 2023. Total, $48,000. The room was completely silent. Mark's business loan, First National, paid in full, February 2022. Total, $38,000. Mark uncrossed his arms, set them flat on the table. Family holidays, 4 trips, 2021 through 2024. Flights, accommodation, activities, total $22,000. I closed the folder. The total across 5 years is $265,000. Every transfer is documented. Every statement is attached. Nobody spoke. I didn't share this to create a debt, I said. I shared it because this table is talking about what I need. And I think it's worth understanding what this family has needed and who provided it. Sandra opened her mouth, closed it. I did it for Emma and Tyler, I said. Not for anyone else at this table. The children had nothing to do with the choices their parents made, and they deserved stability. I looked at Daniel. He was looking at me now, fully. The discomfort on his face had become something else, something that took longer to name. I want to say something else, I said. Rebecca set up a trust before she died. I am the sole trustee. I control all disbursements. I let that sit. If I move into a senior facility, voluntarily or otherwise, the trust closes. The disbursements stop. That is not a threat. It is simply how Rebecca structured it. She was a careful woman. The silence lasted a long time. Mark was the first to move. He stood up quietly, walked to the kitchen, and stood at the counter with his back to the room. I could see his shoulders. They were not the shoulders of a man who felt good about himself. Linda looked at me for the first time since I had arrived. A small nod, almost invisible. Sandra stared at the folder. Then Daniel stood up. He did not look at Sandra. He walked around the table and sat in the empty chair beside me. "Dad," he said. His voice was different, stripped of the careful tone he had been using all morning. I didn't know about any of this. "I know," I said. "The mortgage, Emma's school, Sandra's surgery? Daniel, why didn't you tell us?" I thought about Rebecca, about the legal pad on the kitchen table, about the clause she had insisted on, and the reason she had never fully explained, but that I had always understood. "Because I didn't want it to change anything," I said. "I wanted to give because I wanted to give, not to be owed something." He sat with that. "I'm sorry," he said, "for today, for letting today happen." Sandra had not spoken in several minutes. When she finally did, her voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. "I didn't know about the payments," she said. "About the amounts." "I know you didn't," I said. "I genuinely thought, a senior facility." "I know what you thought," I said. "I'm not angry, Sandra. I'm 69 years old. I don't have the energy for anger." I picked up the folder. "But I'm not moving. and I'd like that to be the end of the conversation. I drove home, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table. Outside, the morning had become afternoon without my noticing. Over the following days, my phone recorded 61 missed calls. Sandra, 34 of them. Daniel, 27. Different tones in each. Sandra's urgent, explanatory, defensive. Daniel's shorter, quieter. On the last one, he didn't say anything at all for a moment before he hung up. I called him back that evening. We talked for an hour. Not about the meeting, not about the money, about Emma's football match that weekend, about a book he was reading, about the way Tyler had started asking questions about grandfather's stories the way Daniel used to when he was small. The ordinary things. The things that had always mattered more than the other things. 3 weeks later, Sandra came to my house alone. She stood at the door. No agenda. No notepad. I wanted to apologize properly, she said. In person. I made her coffee. We sat at the kitchen table for 40 minutes. She was not the woman I had built her into in my worst moments of that Saturday. She was a tired woman who worked too hard and worried too much and had made a serious mistake in how she had handled something real. People are usually more complicated than the worst thing they have done. Rebecca had taught me that. I was still learning it. Rest easy, Rebecca. The family is still standing. You made sure of that, even from where you are. You know what stayed with me about Robert's story? He never wanted revenge. He never wanted to win. He just wanted to sit at his own table with his dignity intact. Most of us know that feeling. We've all had a moment where someone looked at us and decided, without knowing anything about us, that we were less than we are. If Robert's story reminded you of someone you love, a father, a grandfather, someone who gave everything quietly and asked for nothing, share this video with them. Let them know someone told their story today. Like this video if you believe quiet strength is the most powerful kind. Subscribe to Lauren's story, because every day we tell the stories of people who deserved better and got it. And leave me a comment, just one word. Tell me what you felt when Robert opened that folder. I read every single one. See you next time.